I never thought humiliation could feel this physical. My chest was tight, my skin buzzing with heat, and yet my legs felt hollow, like they might fold under me at any second. The boardroom smelled faintly of burnt coffee and those cheap vanilla cookies they always left out for meetings, but all I could focus on was the sound of his voice, sharp and deliberate, as he announced to a room of 30 people that I was finished. Pack your things. You're done here. He didn't whisper it. He didn't pull me aside, give me a private warning, or even the dignity of a closed door. He wanted an audience. I stood there with a half-finished presentation still glowing on the projector, charts frozen mid-sentence, while his words rang louder than anything else in the room. The projector fan hummed. Someone cleared their throat. A pen clicked. Nobody spoke up for me. My badge hung heavy against my chest, and when he yanked it off its lanyard with one sharp tug, it felt like the cord snapped straight through my throat. You failed this project, he continued, making sure his eyes swept the table like a spotlight. You cost us a flagship client. You embarrassed this company. That's not something we tolerate. Not here. I remember looking down at my hands, fingers trembling, palms damp. The slideshow I had spent months perfecting blinked to black. My body wanted to argue, to scream, to defend itself, but I stayed silent. I knew if I opened my mouth, it would shake. I knew if I tried to explain, he'd twist it into weakness. And honestly, I didn't need to argue. Around the long oak table, executives avoided my eyes. Some stared at their notepads. A few glanced at him with rehearsed nods, like trained seals clapping for a trick. The CFO shifted uncomfortably, tapping his pen against a yellow legal pad. His eyes flicked toward me once, quick, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. "Get out!" my boss snapped. His voice cracked just slightly on the last word. Not anger. Performance. He wanted dominance to echo. I swallowed hard. My throat felt raw, as if his words had scraped it clean on their way down. I gathered my laptop, slid the charger into my bag with fingers that didn't feel attached to me, and walked toward the door. No one moved. No one stopped me. The sound of my shoes against the polished floor filled the silence like a drumbeat. At the threshold, I paused for just a second, just long enough to feel the heat of 30 eyes boring into my back. My boss probably thought I was hesitating out of shame, out of defeat. He had no idea. I placed my access card neatly on the CFO's folder, just a flick of the wrist, casual, deliberate, and pushed the door open. The hallway outside was colder than the boardroom, the air conditioner humming above, the faint smell of carpet cleaner rising up. I pressed my palm flat against the wall for a moment, grounding myself. My whole body shook, not from fear, not anymore, but from the sheer restraint of holding back everything I wanted to say. I could have told them the truth. I could have unrolled the receipts, the chain of sabotage, the buried emails, the cuts he had ordered that doomed the project before it ever launched. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I walked, past the receptionist who didn't meet my eyes, past the elevator doors that closed with a metallic sigh, past colleagues who half stood, half sat, caught between loyalty and fear. My wet shoes squeaked faintly on the tile. When I stepped outside, the summer air hit me hard, thick and heavy, smelling of asphalt and rain. I breathed it in like I'd been underwater too long. My hands still trembled, but inside my chest, something shifted. He thought he had ended me in that room. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that his little spectacle had just triggered the one clause I'd been waiting for. And once it started, there was no stopping what came next. I didn't cry in the elevator. I did what I've always done when life tries to drown me. I counted. Breaths, steps, floors. By the time I reached the lobby, my pulse had a number I could hold. That's the thing about surviving on the thin edge. You either learn systems or you break under stories other people tell about you. He told a story in that room. I had a system. Here's what no one in that building knew about me. I wasn't the kind of hustle that posts motivational quotes and lives on espresso. I was the kind who learned to stretch $6 over 3 days and still send money to my mother on Fridays. My father's hospital bills taught me what interest really is. Community college taught me how to debug spaghetti code on a second-hand laptop with a missing N key. Startups taught me how to speak fluent PowerPoint to men who confuse volume with vision. And he, my boss, taught me how sabotage looks when it wears cologne and a smile. He was charming on stage, magnetic in interviews, allergic to accountability. In private, he loved phrases like cut the fat, fail fast, and we don't have time for hand-holding. He said hand-holding like quality assurance and user acceptance and rollback plan were all just synonyms for cowardice. The first time I flagged a risk register for the client rollout, he slid it back across the table with 2 fingers and said, "Do you want to ship or write poetry?" People laughed. I added a column for ignored risks. He starved us quiet. 2 months before go live, he pulled the budget line for the Canary deployment. It was $18,700, a tiny insurance policy on a multi-million contract. Our customers are not beta testers, he said into the camera during an all-hands, and then, off-camera, told procurement to cancel the staging hardware because ops can make do. He approved a minor change request that swapped our message queue library for one his friend's agency preferred. The new one had a known issue with idempotency under burst load. Our QA lead raised a red flag. 2 days later, she was reallocated to internal tooling. He sent me a smiley face on Slack. See? Resourcefulness. The night the monitoring alerts went quiet, I thought we'd turned a corner. We hadn't. He had asked the SRE on call to tone down the noise for executives during sensitive demo windows. That meant disabling the threshold that would have warned us about the cascading retries in the payment microservice. We only found out because a junior analyst noticed an anomaly in conversion funnels at 2:14 a.m. and DM'd me with a screenshot that looked like a cliff edge. I forwarded it up. He replied at 6:30 a.m. Don't panic. Focus on optics. He liked that word, optics, like the right angle could change the physics of impact. You want receipts? I kept them. Not out of malice, out of muscle memory. When you've spent years being talked over by people who call their gut a strategy, you learn to name things twice and keep every version. I saved the original test plan with the signatures. I saved his edits to the go, no-go checklist, where he deleted rollback steps and replaced them with press release messaging. I exported the Jira audit log, where the build ticket for v3 9.2 was reassigned at 11:07 p.m., and the artifact hash silently changed. I printed the PO he forced our vendor to cut, cheaper, faster, worse, and I highlighted the clause about warranty disclaimers, and still I stayed. I stayed because my team was on that track with me, and because the client on the other end wasn't a logo. It was a bunch of people who had staked their internal credibility on us. I stayed because rent doesn't care about your principles. I stayed because some of us are first in our families to sit at these tables. And leaving isn't just quitting a job. It's stepping off a ladder you had to build while climbing. So I learned to braid 2 lives together. The one where I smiled through status meetings, and the one where I prepared for the day his story would swallow me whole. The second life began on a Tuesday 6 months ago, in the back of a coffee shop that smelled like wet wood and orange peels. I was there because an old mentor had texted, "You need to meet Mara. She helps companies when men like your boss think they're bulletproof." Mara didn't look like a vulture capitalist, and she didn't talk like a startup whisperer. She asked me about failure modes the way a good engineer asks about edge cases, calm, curious, precise. She worked for a family office with a boring name and a terrifyingly good legal team. They didn't buy flashy startups. They bought paper, loans, notes, promises written at 3 a.m. by CFOs who thought the sun would never rise. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because sometimes the only way to fix a story is to own the book," she said, stirring her tea. "Your company has a term loan with a covenant package written by optimists. It's generous. If certain things go wrong, it triggers a default, not bankruptcy, a fork in the road. I told her I was a PM, not a lender. She smiled. You're the only one in the org with enough visibility to know if those things are going to go wrong, or are already going wrong. I didn't sign anything that day. I went home and read. Debt covenants, DSCR, cross default, make-whole clauses, change of control blocks. I read until the sun came up and the legalese started to sound like code. 2 weeks later, after I ran my notes past an ethics lawyer who made me repeat the word firewalls 5 times, I signed a narrow consulting agreement with Mara's firm. Not to sabotage, to observe. No insider trading, no trading in our stock. No disclosure of non-public technical detail. The only thing I provided was timing. Whether the risk map the executives called pessimistic looked like it would intersect with the red lines loan documents call events. This isn't revenge, I told myself, sitting on my bathroom floor with my back against the tub, the only quiet place in my apartment. This is a contingency plan for when physics beats optics. From that point on, I kept 2 calendars, the company one with sprints and demos and steering committees, and the private one with quiet, brutal checkpoints. SLA breach probability if we ship without the canary, churn risk if the incident touches the client's core operations, the day the deferred tax liability balloons. While we're still booking ARR, we can't deliver. The loan agreement had a leverage ratio threshold. It had a minimum liquidity clause. It had a provision, obscure but there, that tied a material client penalty to a covenant tripwire. He kept adding weight to the wrong side of the scale. He cut the rehearsal for the client's blackout window because I have a podcast interview. He told legal to be flexible with the indemnity language and then bragged about saving 40 grand. He waved away a vendor's warning about throughput with, "We'll fix it live." When the vendor asked for a waiver, he signed it without reading past the first paragraph. I know because the PDF metadata still had his assistant's name on it, and the timestamp was 12:03 a.m., the night of his birthday party. Meanwhile, the team did what teams do when they're led by a man who confuses daring with competence. We tried to save each other. We wrote extra playbooks and called them notes. He didn't know about the other book, the one with dates circled in pencil and a single simple calculus. If the client's penalty lands where I think it lands, and if cash on hand is what I think it is, and if the leverage ratio moves the way math says it will, then the story he told about me becomes a clause in a contract he never bothered to read. I walked home through a city that smelled like hot pavement and cut limes from a bar somewhere spilling margaritas on a Tuesday. My phone buzzed. A teammate. I'm sorry. Another. They made us sign an incident narrative. Then a third. Just 3 words from a number I didn't have saved. It was Mara. Is it time? The email hit my inbox at 7:42 a.m. the next morning. Subject line, client penalty enforcement, immediate action required. My stomach sank, even though I had been waiting for it, almost inviting it. The flagship client, the one my boss swore we'd dazzled, had activated the clause no one thought they'd dare touch. Liquidated damages for service disruption. The number was brutal, a 6-figure bleed that looked small compared to the deal's total value, but devastating when measured against the company's fragile debt covenants. I stared at the figure, the decimals, the timestamp. Every keystroke in that email was proof. Proof that the failure wasn't mine, and proof that the story he told in the boardroom had just become an official event of default. At 8:03 a.m., I got the confirmation. The covenant on liquidity fell below the threshold, and the penalty tripped a cross-default clause, hidden in the thicket of loan agreements. I didn't need to interpret it. Mara's legal team had already sent me a 1-line text. Trigger confirmed. Proceeding. The world didn't explode. It never does in moments like that. Outside my apartment window, a garbage truck rattled over potholes. My upstairs neighbor's kid bounced a basketball against the hardwood. Life went on as if nothing had just shifted. But in that quiet, ordinary morning, my old company's control was slipping from his hands, and he had no idea. By noon, the office was buzzing like a kicked beehive. Screenshots poured into my messages. Emergency meeting. CFO looks pale. They're blaming ops. My team, the ones left behind, were caught in a storm of half-truths and whispered orders. I wanted to run to them, to tell them it wasn't their fault, to tell them none of this was chaos. It was physics, doing what optics couldn't stop. But I couldn't. Not yet. That afternoon, the CFO called me. His voice was low, almost conspiratorial. They're scrambling. He's saying the penalty is minor, that we can spin it as a hiccup. But... He paused, and I could hear papers rustling. The lenders are circling. They asked for updated financials. We can't cover this. I didn't answer right away. My heart was racing, but my voice came out steady. You'll have a board call soon. Don't fight it. Just let it happen. There was a silence on the line, then a resigned sigh. You know something, don't you? I know enough. By evening, the cracks were visible. One exec forwarded me a panicked thread. Dozens of messages, my boss blustering about lawyers handling it, while directors asked blunt, terrified questions. A VP sent me a text. Are you okay? He said you abandoned us. I typed, deleted, retyped, and finally sent back, I didn't abandon anyone. Trust me. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally let myself break. I curled on the floor, laptop humming beside me, and sobbed into my sleeve until my face ached. Not just for me, but for the team still under his shadow, for the clients caught in the fallout, for the years I'd spent believing loyalty would protect me. Then I wiped my face, opened my notebook, and checked the box I'd left blank for months. Default triggered. I whispered it aloud just once to make it real. This isn't revenge. This is governance. 2 hours later, the official notice went out. An emergency board meeting had been scheduled. My former boss thought it was his chance to spin, to wriggle free, to rewrite the story again. He didn't know the ending was already drafted, and this time, I was the one holding the pen. The boardroom didn't look the same when I walked back in. Same polished oak table, same bottled water lined up like soldiers, same stale smell of recycled air. But the energy was different. Gone was the easy arrogance, the casual banter. Every seat was stiff, every eye darting. The CFO's tie was crooked, sweat blooming under his collar. A few directors clutched folders like lifelines, and at the head of the table sat my former boss. Jaw tight, rehearsed smile stretched too wide. He was talking before I'd even reached my chair. We had a hiccup, yes, a regrettable incident, but nothing we can't manage with a little cooperation. Optics are crucial here, and optics won't fix this. The CFO cut in. His voice trembled, but the words landed. We breached covenants. Liquidity is below threshold. We've triggered cross-default. The lenders have already. Handled, my boss snapped, cutting him off with a sharp wave of his hand. I spoke with counsel. We'll negotiate an amendment. They don't want to own us any more than we want them meddling in operations. He laughed, brittle and forced. It's business, nothing more. The door opened behind me. For a beat, the room went still. A trio walked in, 2 lawyers in dark suits, and Mara, calm as ever, a folder tucked neatly under her arm. The directors shifted uneasily, recognizing authority when they saw it. My boss's smile faltered. And who are you? Mara set the folder on the table, her voice crisp. We represent Belvedere Holdings, primary holder of your term debt. She flipped the folder open, sliding a document forward. As of this morning, you are in default. Under Section 7.1 of the loan agreement, we are exercising our right to convert debt to equity. The words hit like a gavel. A director coughed. Another muttered, "Oh my God." My boss blinked, confused, then scoffed. You can't be serious. This is a bluff. We'll fight it. You won't, Mara said flatly. She gestured toward the CFO. He's already confirmed the numbers. Cash flow insufficient. Ratios breached. Client penalty undisputed. It's not a matter of opinion. My boss turned red, pounding the table with his palm. This is absurd. I built this company from the ground up. I won't let some predatory fund? Funny thing about building, I said, finally speaking. My voice was steady, even as my pulse hammered in my ears. If you build on rotten beams, the house doesn't stand. All eyes turned to me. Recognition flickered across faces, shock mixing with something sharper. Relief. My boss's mouth opened, then closed. You, he hissed. You don't even work here anymore. True, I said, sliding into a seat across from him. But I do work here now. I tapped the folder Mara had placed before me. Belvedere appointed me interim chair of the restructuring committee, effective immediately. The room froze. Even the hum of the projector seemed to quiet. One director cleared his throat. Is this binding? Mara nodded. Executed this morning. Filed with the registrar. The conversion is valid, and the board will reflect the new equity distribution today. My boss laughed, high and wild, like a man teetering on a cliff edge. You think you can just walk in here and steal? No one stole anything, I interrupted. You signed the loan. You ignored the covenants. You triggered the default. The math doesn't care about your speeches. For the first time, silence swallowed him whole. His face blanched, fury twitching under his skin, but no words came out. The chair at the end of the table, once his throne, suddenly looked very empty, and everyone in the room knew it. The sound of the resolution being read out was almost ceremonial, each word precise, final, echoing in that boardroom like a verdict. Effective immediately, the chief executive officers removed for cause. For a second no one moved. The directors sat stiff, pens idle, eyes darting between me and the man who had ruled them with charm and intimidation for years. Then the CFO exhaled, loud, shaky, as if he'd been holding his breath for months. A couple of directors nodded slowly, like their necks had been locked in place until that moment. Across the table, my former boss exploded. You can't do this to me. This is my company. His chair screeched as he shoved it back, palms slamming the oak so hard the water bottles rattled. I gave you all jobs, salaries, stock. I carried this place on my back while you sabotaged us, I said quietly. That stopped him. His mouth hung open, rage caught in his throat. I slid a folder across the table. Inside printouts, screenshots, logs. The JIRA audit where he reassigned the build ticket at midnight. The procurement email with his red pen crossing out safety tests. The Slack thread where he ordered alerts silenced during a demo. Pages and pages of receipts. Each one a nail in the coffin he built himself. These aren't opinions, I continued. These are your signatures, your edits, your directives. You cut corners, ignored warnings, and gambled with client trust. When it collapsed, you blamed me. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to turn my firing into a spectacle. A director cleared his throat. Is all of this verified? The CFO nodded, voice low. Every line. For the first time, my former boss looked small, his shoulders curled inward, his eyes darting, searching for an ally in a room that suddenly had none. You don't understand, he whispered, desperation cracking his voice. This is how the industry works. Everyone does it. You push, you bend, No, I cut him off. You bend until it breaks. Then you pretend it was someone else's fault. But this time, the numbers didn't break in silence. They screamed, and the lenders listened. He opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. Just the faint sound of his breath, uneven, panicked. One of the directors leaned back, folding his arms. It's over. We need stability now, not spin. The vote was swift, unanimous. He was removed, escorted out, not by security, but by silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm, heavy and cleansing. I stayed seated, hands folded, face calm. I wasn't triumphant, not outwardly. Inside, though, I felt something sharper than victory. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was the clean, steady satisfaction of a system finally correcting itself, however late. He had walked me out weeks earlier with humiliation dripping from his voice. Now he walked out alone, with nothing but his own lies clinging to him, and for the first time, the boardroom felt like mine. The first week after he was gone, the building felt like a house after a storm. Papers still scattered, blinds rattling, the smell of something scorched lingering in the air. But the silence was different, lighter. People walked the halls with cautious steps, as if afraid to believe the weight had actually lifted. I didn't sit in his chair. I chose the one beside it deliberately. I wanted them to see that this wasn't about replacing one ego with another. It was about balance. My first move wasn't a speech. It was an invitation. I called in the leads he'd sidelined, the ones who'd been shoved into corners for speaking up. We spread out whiteboards, rewrote the roadmap, built rollback steps back into the process, reinstated QA cycles. Simple things, but they felt like oxygen. A week later, I flew to meet the client he'd nearly destroyed. They were wary, exhausted, ready to cut ties. I didn't spin, didn't sugarcoat. I showed them exactly what went wrong and who made the calls. Then I showed them the new process. Transparent, auditable, accountable. We signed a revised contract in a windowless room that smelled like burnt coffee. But when the pen hit paper, I felt the first real exhale in months. Inside the company, whispers turned into momentum. People started staying late again, but not out of fear, out of choice, out of hope. I walked the floor at midnight once and found 2 engineers laughing over a bug fix, like it was a puzzle instead of a burden. That sound, uncoiled, unguarded, was worth more than any metric. And then 2 months in, it happened. A crisp email, subject line, request for consulting engagement. It was from him. He wanted to offer strategic guidance, said he could add value as an advisor. He attached a PDF resume polished like a mirror, as if the ink could cover the wreckage he left behind. I read it once, slowly. Then I forward it to HR with a single line, decline politely. Instead, I drafted something else. A memo announcing a new internship fund for underrepresented juniors in tech. Budget line? Exactly equal to his last annual bonus. When the announcement went out, the floor erupted in applause. Not for me, but for what it meant, that the story of this place had changed hands. That night, as the office lights dimmed and the city hummed outside, I sat alone for a moment, staring at the same table where he once ripped my badge away. The memory didn't sting anymore. It steadied me. He thought that day was my ending. But it was never about revenge. It was about custody, and the company was finally in the right hands.